In the heart of an old, quiet barn, where sunbeams danced in the dusty air and the air smelled of sweet hay and aged wood, there was a tiny, perfect hole in the wall. Inside this hole was a nest, woven from the softest cattail fluff, threads of forgotten yarn, and bits of downy feather. This was the safe and snug home of 3 little mice, Pip, Squeak, and Theo. Squeak was the bravest. Her whiskers were always twitching, ready for an adventure, and her little paws were always ready to pounce and play. Theo was the clever one. He was quieter than his sister, and he loved to watch things, noticing the way a spider spun its web, or how a shadow moved across the floor as the sun journeyed across the sky. And then there was Pip. Pip was the youngest and most cautious. He loved their cozy nest more than anything. To him, the barn was a very big place, full of giant shapes and strange noises. He loved his siblings dearly, but while they saw a world of exciting challenges, Pip often saw a world of things that were just a bit too high, a bit too far, or a bit too scary. One golden afternoon, a wonderful smell drifted into their home. It wasn't the familiar scent of hay or dust. This was a new smell, sweet and warm, like sunshine and summer berries all rolled into one. "What is that?" whispered Squeak, her nose twitching a mile a minute. Theo was already at the edge of their hole, peering out. "I don't know," he murmured, "but it's coming from up high." Pip hesitated, but the delicious scent was too tempting to ignore. He crept to the opening and looked out alongside his brother and sister. Their 3 little heads poked out of the wall, and they all looked up. There, resting on a thick, dark wooden beam high above the barn floor, was a single, perfect, sun-dried strawberry. It was wrinkled and deep red, glowing like a tiny jewel where a ray of sunlight touched it. It was the most amazing treat they had ever seen. Their mother had told them stories of such treasures, but they had never seen one for themselves. "Wow," breathed Squeak. "It's beautiful," whispered Theo. Pip just looked at the vast space between the floor and the beam. "It's too high," he said softly, a familiar worry creeping into his tummy. "We can never reach it." But the thought of that sweet, juicy strawberry was already planted in their minds. They had to try. Squeak, being the bravest, decided she would go first. "I can jump it," she declared with confidence. She scurried down to the barn floor and looked around, her bright eyes searching for a launch pad. She spotted a tall, messy pile of hay not far from the beam. It was the highest point she could reach from the ground. "I'll get a running start, leap from the top of the haystack, and land right on the beam," she explained. Theo nodded thoughtfully, calculating the distance. Pip just shivered. "Be careful, Squeak," he squeaked. Squeak took a deep breath, backed up, and then raced towards the haystack. Her little legs were a blur as she ran. She scrambled up the slippery stalks of hay, her claws finding purchase, until she stood on the very top. For a moment, she was a tiny queen on a golden mountain. She crouched down, wiggled her hind legs, and then sprang into the air with all her might. She flew. For a wonderful second, she was a furry little bird, soaring through the dusty sunlight. The sweet smell of the strawberry filled her nose. She reached out her paws, but the beam was still too far. She missed it by a whisker and tumbled down, 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 landing with a soft poof in a deep, forgiving pile of hay below. She shook her head, covered in bits of straw but unharmed. "It's farther than it looks," she sighed. Next, it was Theo's turn. "Jumping won't work," he said, tapping a thoughtful paw against his chin. "But maybe climbing will." He scampered over to the massive wooden post that held the beam up. The wood was old and rough near the bottom, full of splinters and cracks that were perfect for a clever mouse to climb. He began to climb, moving carefully and deliberately. He was a natural, his little claws finding every tiny ridge and foothold. He made his way up, higher and higher, until he was far above the barn floor. Pip watched from below, his heart thumping with a mix of fear and hope. But then, Theo ran into a problem. The upper part of the post, just below the beam, was smooth. Years and years of barn owls landing there had polished the wood until it was slick as glass. There were no cracks, no splinters, nothing for his claws to hold on to. He tried to find a way around, stretching his little body, but it was no use. With a sad little sigh, he carefully slid all the way back down to the floor. Pip watched his two siblings gather at the bottom of the post, their whiskers drooping. He shuffled over to join them, his own small shoulders slumping. He looked up at the strawberry, which seemed to be mocking them from its impossible perch. "It's no use," Pip whispered, his voice small and full of sorrow. "It's just too high for one mouse." The three little mice huddled together at the base of the giant wooden post. All their clever and brave ideas had failed. The golden sunbeam that had lit up the strawberry was gone now, and the barn was slowly filling with the long purple shadows of evening. The air grew cooler, and a sense of defeat settled over them like a heavy blanket. The sweet scent of the strawberry still drifted down, but now it felt like a reminder of what they couldn't have. They were tired, disappointed, and ready to give up. Squeak's adventurous spirit was gone, and Theo's clever mind was out of ideas. They stared up at the unreachable prize, a tiny red speck in the growing gloom. Pip looked at his siblings' sad faces, and his heart ached. "I was right," he said softly, his voice trembling just a little. "It's impossible." For a moment, they all believed him. Squeak's ears drooped, and Theo looked down at his paws. Maybe it was time to go back to their warm, safe nest, empty-handed. Maybe some things were just not meant for small mice. But as they sat there in the quiet sadness, Theo, the clever thinker, kept looking up. His eyes weren't on the strawberry anymore. They were on a piece of thick, dusty twine that dangled from another rafter, the very one Squeak had tried to use to help her jump. It hung down, swaying gently, ending just a few feet from the strawberry beam. He looked at the twine. He looked at his sister, Squeak, who was so strong and an excellent climber. He looked at his little brother, Pip, who was so cautious and steady, and also very light. Then, a tiny spark of an idea began to glow in his mind. He turned to Pip and whispered, "You are right, Pip. It is impossible for one mouse." Pip looked at him, confused. Theo smiled a tiny mouse smile. "But we are not one. We are three." Squeak's ears perked up. "What do you mean, Theo?" "Look," Theo said, pointing with his nose. "Squeak, you are the strongest. You can climb that rope." "Pip," he said, turning to his smaller brother, "you are the most cautious and have the best balance. And you are light. And he paused. "I am good at reaching." He explained his plan. Squeak would climb the dangling twine and hold on tight. Then Pip, being so careful and steady, would climb onto her shoulders. Finally, Theo, who was clever at balancing, would climb onto Pip's shoulders. Together, they would be a three-mouse tower, tall enough to reach the beam. Pip's eyes grew wide. "Climb on top of you? But I might wobble. We might all fall." The familiar fear fluttered in his chest. Squeak looked at him, her bravery returning. "I'll hold on tight, Pip. I won't let you fall." Theo nodded. "We'll do it together, slowly and carefully. I know we can." Looking at the hope shining in his siblings' eyes, Pip felt something new blooming inside him. a tiny seed of courage. He took a deep breath and gave a small, determined nod. Squeak went first. She scurried to the twine and began to climb, her strong paws gripping the thick strands easily. She climbed until she was hanging level with the smooth part of the post, and then she braced herself, holding on with all her might. Now it was Pip's turn. Trembling, he climbed up Squeak's back. He felt her strong muscles beneath his paws, and it gave him courage. He focused on being as still and steady as a little stone statue, just as Theo had asked. He stood on her shoulders, his heart beating like a tiny drum, and tried not to look down. Finally, Theo scrambled up, light as a feather, first over Squeak, then up Pip's back. When he stood on Pip's shoulders, the mouse tower swayed. For a terrifying moment, Pip wobbled. He squeezed his eyes shut, certain they would all fall. But then he felt Squeak's grip tighten below him and heard Theo whisper, "Steady, Pip, steady," from above. He took a breath, focused, and held perfectly still. The tower grew solid. Theo stood on his tiptoes. His whiskers brushed against the rough wood of the beam. He reached out one paw and touched it. He had made it. With a final, careful stretch, Theo's little paw reached the sun-dried strawberry. He didn't grab it. Instead, he gave it a gentle push. The strawberry rolled slowly to the edge of the beam, teetered for a moment, and then fell, landing with a soft thump right in the middle of the soft pile of hay Squeak had landed in earlier. Their mission was a success. Carefully, they climbed down, one by one, their hearts filled with triumph. They raced to the hay pile and found their prize, smelling even more delicious up close. It was too big for one of them to carry, but working together, they pushed and rolled the wonderful treasure all the way across the barn floor and up into their cozy nest. Inside their safe little home, they divided the strawberry into 3 perfect pieces. As Pip took his first bite, a burst of sweet, sugary sunshine filled his mouth. It was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted, and it tasted even better because they had earned it as a team. That night, snuggled warmly between Squeak and Theo, Pip looked out at the dark, quiet barn. It didn't seem so big or scary anymore. He had learned that some things that seem impossible when you are alone become possible when you have family to help you. He no longer saw impossible challenges, but new adventures they could face together. Feeling safe and strong, Pip closed his eyes and drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, dreaming of the sweet taste of victory and the quiet strength of being part of a team.